How are you guys doing? Welcome. We are currently 5 people. We're just going to we'll move forward as we wait for other people to join us. Um, so today's conversation is going to be about domestic violence, which is a topic that I hold dear to my heart. So because we are in um, October, towards the end of October, beginning November, we start off with domestic awareness because it's kind of the season for that. Will be This is our first event in regard to just activism. So days of activism, just speaking about domestic violence in general. Uh, as we had communicated, some of our topics are going to be on financial empowerment and some mental breakthrough, cyberbullying. I have two speakers with me today, Miss Ida Bukubuza, and I also have Miss Erin as well, Erin Baker. So they're going to be speaking about two topics. Ida will be speaking about cyberbullying, which has become a more common than we think thing going on. And then, of course, we have to talk about mental health because that is something we are so, in our communities, we tend to be a little unknowledgeable and we don't want to, admit that. But it's a huge aspect of domestic violence. I can personally attest to that. But I'm going to start off by playing a video of our campaign. And as we go into our talk, we'll just kind of see what is going on. Our main goal is to create awareness, and we're trying to get people to come out and speak. Um, this particular one is for people who have survived so they can share their story, and the people who are currently maybe affected will get some hope and know that things can change for you. You can make that decision. It's fine. You can be okay. Things like that. That's our goal for this particular campaign. That is why we named it Yes, You Can. You can heal. You can be that center point. You can be that person. You can be a survivor. So this campaign is run by Minority Wealth Gap. Minority Wealth Gap is based in Los Angeles. So, and then as a pilot project, Bernice Women is under Minority Wealth Gap, focused on the violence aspect of some of the projects that we run. And this is the campaign. We're starting this. It was originally Bernice Women, based in Uganda, started in 2016, started by a group of young corporate women who were very focused on the fact that constantly when we speak about domestic violence, we are thinking more of the rural areas. So like the villages back in the villages or back in the rural areas. We always forget the corporate women, and that is what the focus was, meaning the girls who go to work, the ones who won't speak, who are afraid to speak because they think, it's going to be a shameful thing, or they're afraid because maybe their abusers are powerful people, things like that. And that's how it begins and grows into this story. So just a brief play of our video here to introduce our campaign.
Increase the volume. Can everybody hear the video? I can't hear the video. Catherine.
The volume for the video is off.
Okay, so can we start that? Figure out
The audio is not on.
Yeah.
Can you hear it?
Yes, I think we're starting to hear. Oh, maybe not. We hear it in bits and pieces, so
Jackie, can I hear? Am I hearing you saying something?
yeah, we hear it in bits and pieces. Not the audio is not really good. Is there a way you can increase it on your computer?
Let me just log into. Yes.
Can you play it from there? Maybe it can work. Play. Mm. Yeah, there's a disconnect in terms of the speaker.
Okay, let me play it from WhatsApp. Ida shared it with me. I think that will be better.
I'm not sure why the audio is not playing, but at this point, just keep going. We can Ida, can you put the link in the chat for the video, maybe, so people can watch it at their own time?
Sorry about that. I guess we cannot hear. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. So Ida was kind enough to share that link in the chat. If you can, maybe much later, you can just go in there and watch it. Our call is to share We want people to tag family, friends, people who are going through domestic violence, people who have survived. Let's put our voice out there so we can be able to add on. There's so many voices that are out there. Somehow we have to get to the end of this. This has to come to an end. So briefly, relationships. I made some notes, things that I always think about. As maybe let me start by sharing my story. I was married for about 10 years, and I'll constantly reference my speakers here. So if you want, you can take notes and just respond to what I'm going to be talking about. 10 years ago, for about 10 years, I was married to, I want to say, a guy, had three beautiful children. Things were good until they took a turn for the worst. And unfortunately for me, it was life threatening, which most times it is for everybody else. Now, could I have gotten out much earlier? Yes, if somebody had talked to me about some of the things that I'm talking to you guys about. Could I have saved maybe saved myself earlier? Yes, I believe so. If I had chosen to stay, I think maybe I wouldn't be here giving this um, presentation or running a campaign on this issue. But in general, I wanted to share about what it is. So it starts off as a relationship, which is actually meant to enrich our lives, right? And those of our partners. But sometimes it can go to the darker side, and most times it goes unnoticed. Now, coming from communities like in Uganda, where everything gets put under the carpet, like just dragged under the carpet, yes, it can be life threatening. And we've seen some examples. We've seen all these things on social media. We've read stories, we've seen it in the news. It's kind of easy for you to watch it in the news until you really leave the scenario. That is when you know that domestic violence is a topic that needs to be addressed. So it is a serious public health issue. It impacts survivors, not just physically, but mentally. It's a whole other topic when you talk about the mental aspect of it. That is why we have Erin here. She will be our first presenter, but before she gets in, I'll just quickly go through some of the things about domestic violence. So when you hear domestic violence, what do you think? Most times we always think fighting, right? One partner beating another. Most times that's not what it's all about. Now, moving to this side of the world, to the US, I got to learn a few more things. So the term domestic violence can be used to refer to any behavior occurring in a romantic relationship that causes physical, sexual, or mental harm, regardless of whether people live in the same household. So you don't even have to be in the same household for it to be domestic violence. Domestic violence can occur between any two partners, regardless of gender or sexual orientation. Another term to use can be intimate partner violence, which is also often used to refer to violence that occurs between romantic partners. So while the term domestic violence is sometimes reserved for violence that takes place in the household, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the household. In either case, the abuser could be a current spouse, a former spouse, or a dating partner. Domestic violence is not uncommon. In the US, where we are, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men in the United States have reported experiencing either sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking, which some of us don't think is violence. It actually is. If somebody won't let you go, stalking is a thing. It can impact on your mental health. It can also impact on your physical health because you're constantly running from somebody, right? Abuse does not have to have multiple occurrences or be carried out over years to be considered domestic violence, even one time. And if I had known that, I probably would have been in a better place. So even the one time, that one episode, speaking to some people who are in, back home, when you report and somebody says, oh my God, no, he was, I mean, forgive him, do this. You have to be mindful of such scenarios, because one episode means it is possible. It can happen again and again. Abuse, while the effects of violence can be devastating, they are preventable. And that is what we have to focus on. You can actually prevent domestic violence, and we can all play a part to make sure that our relationships are healthy, respectful, and non-violent. That is something we all can do. Um, just more about violence. Domestic violence includes the forms of domestic violence. There's the physical violence, which we are all used to hearing: kicking, hitting, slapping, physical force, those that are intended to hurt somebody else. Sexual violence, that is forced or attempted forcing of a partner to engage in sexual acts when the partner does not consent and is not capable of consenting. This includes both sexual events and non-physical events like sexting. This is where my colleague Ida is going to come in. So it can also be over the phone. It can also be on the internet, even stalking as well. Somebody can constantly harass your phone, and much as we don't know it, it ends up into a mental, disability somehow. Psychological aggression, verbal, non-verbal communicating to erode a person's self-worth, harm the partner mentally or emotionally, or exert control and power over the partner. Some of us are very knowledgeable about such things. Somebody is constantly on you verbally, non-verbally. Verbally is the constant words that are said to you. Oh my God, you're not worth it. Things that make you feel like you need to be hiding all the time. You can't express yourself. You're worried. That is abuse. That is domestic violence. That is violence. Now we go to stalking: repeated unwanted attention or contact that triggers fear or worry about partner safety. In other words, if you're constantly looking over your shoulder, that is violence. That is something that we need to be aware of. The safety of others that are close to the victim. In other words, not just me. It could be my kids. It could be my family. In an incident where I run off to hiding, I've gone to my family, and even my parents are not safe because I'm present. That is unacceptable. It's also violence in its own way. So controlling behaviors are harmful to relationships and may point to more severe domestic abuse. Controlling behaviors are actions, whether verbal or physical, that limit a partner's mobility or access to friends, family, or environments outside of the home. You may wonder why I insisted on the word friends. That is something that I never thought was control. When your partner is like, you have to throw out those friends. Your family is not, I'm not working with them. Constantly, abusers are like that. They'll cut off all forms of communication. You can't speak to your family. You can't speak to your friends. So you're just in one bubble, which is where the abuser is. And those are real things. The victim, in worst case scenarios, may be deprived of food, money, and even access to things like healthcare. We've been seeing these things in some of the scenarios we see on TV, in the news. We follow things. Most recent scenario that I can point out, which everybody I know has seen, is that video with Puff Daddy. Imagine that young lady and what she has been through. And all these things we've just discussed right now. Just keep that in the back of your mind as we talk here. So I'm going to introduce Erin, Miss Erin Becker. She's going to be tackling mental health. And I already warned her, Erin. I did. I was like, our kind of community finds mental health as a no-no. They don't want to talk about it. So just keep that in mind. But you're welcome to present. And I'll just be running the slides.
Perfect. Thank you. Hey, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Let me know if you can't. I hope you can see me. And I do understand kind of the conundrum of mental health and what does that look like. And that many of us, myself included, even though I am now a counselor, a therapist, grew up thinking that mental health was a false that it wasn't within my community, or that it was a rich white people thing. Like everyone else doesn't have mental health. Everyone else isn't depressed. It's like a privileged thing. And come to find out that it absolutely is not. When we're thinking about mental health and the effects of domestic violence, I want to go over some statistics really quickly, because I think that these statistics help solidify literally why we suffer the way we do, right? So about 41% of women, so that's 4 out of 10, and about 20% of men, 3 out of 10, experience contact with sexual violence, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner. And that's and reported an intimate partner violence related impact during their lifetime. So at least 4 out of 10 women have reported impact during their lifetime of domestic violence. That's huge. Over 61 million women and 53 million men have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetime. So now we're looking at the percentage, but it's over 61 million women have experienced this. So this is what many people say is an epidemic within the world, not just the country, not just in the United States. An average of 24 people per minute are victims of rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner, and that is here in the United States. So I'm going to read that again, because it's an average of 24 people per minute are victims. That is profound to me. More than 12 million women and men over the course of a single year. So these are not just small numbers. These are not just, one person in our neighborhood is happening to. When you have numbers, and we're talking about in the millions over a course of a year, or 24 people per minute, this is something that is happening over and over and over again, often. So some of the things that happen when folks are navigating and are victims, and so it still happens with survivors and victors as well, is that folks develop mental health conditions. So whether you all believe in things like major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety, that doesn't matter, right? But let's just talk about kind of what that depression looks like. So if you're thinking about depression, it's when we're talking about the major depressive disorder, they mean depression, but it is the long impacts of isolation and what isolation does, right? It's the extreme sadness. It's if you have ever felt like I can't get out of bed, or I can barely get out of bed today. I have my children I have to take care of, but even that, feeding them is a chore because I am so sad. Sometimes sitting in a space and drifting off and not being present in that space, all of those are symptoms of when you are in feeling major depression. So 35 to 70% of women who experience intimate partner violence are diagnosed with depression. Those are people who actually come forward and are looking for diagnosis. So it's 35 to 70%, but I would say that those numbers are a lot higher, because there are a lot of people who do not come forward and are not diagnosed who are experiencing IPV. And that is compared to 12% of women in general population. So out of the general population who are not victims of domestic violence, only 12% of women in general population are diagnosed with depression. So it's big, and it happens often. And that extreme sadness, that isolation, that withdrawal is something that is very serious. When you're thinking about generalized anxiety disorder, right? It's that. I think I've heard many times people talk about that anxiousness that won't go away. So if people are like, "Hey, how are you doing today, Erin?" And I'm like, "I'm good, but I don't know. Something just feels off." And it doesn't feel right, and I just feel like I can't trust my environment, and I feel it in my stomach, right? So it's those feelings in the stomach that make you feel sick. Sometimes people feel it in their bodies. If you've ever felt anxiousness in your hands, sometimes it's tingling. Sometimes it's actually, I feel nauseous. And sometimes it also manifests in like, I can't eat because I want to throw up, right? Those are symptoms of anxiety disorder. And again, it might not be, when you're hearing me talk about it, you might think like, oh no, these are just normal things. Those are not normal for a person's body. We are not supposed to be feeling those somatic feelings all the time. And when you do feel them, that is where the generalized anxiety disorder comes from. Many times we've heard post-traumatic stress disorder or syndrome, and a lot of times we think about it for soldiers, right? For individuals who have been in war and have seen extreme violence or have extreme violence happen to them. But actually, PTSD is what we call it, happens at a very high rate to individuals who experience IPV. So it's 75% of individuals who experience intimate partner violence are victims of PTSD. So that is PTSD is in the form of kind of flashbacks. It is also mixed in with major depressive disorder. It is that kind of, you're still living in that trauma even though you're outside of the event or you're outside of the violence. So even if people feel like they're in a safe space, they're still navigating with the feelings of what that violence felt like, even though it's over or even though it's not happening anymore. And then, of course, as we all know, substance use disorders. And the reason why a lot of us do substance use disorders is because we're trying to mask the pain, right? When you are isolated and you are in abuse to that level, you have nothing else, that a lot of people then turn to drugs and alcohol to try to pacify that feeling. Many times, survivors of domestic violence really try to blame themselves for the abuse that they receive. Folks can become self-critical, self-destructive, and even suicidal. And we have even seen folks complete not just suicide, of course, for themselves, but also sometimes the violence is so bad that folks end up killing the abuser, but also sometimes our children and the people around us to get out of it. Chronic abuse can create trauma responses that interfere with future relationships too, which, you know, as a therapist, I've seen many times. Many individuals that I work with right now are not in current situations of violence, but the post-traumatic stress syndrome is so deep within them that it does impact the relationships that we have. So I think that that's the piece of the healing that we're talking about, is if we do not talk about and heal from the violence that happened, if we hold it in, it will impact how we navigate in our everyday lives. And many times survivors struggle with emotional regulation, disassociation. And I talked about that numbing and even having trouble reading social cues, because I could very easily say oh, stop. And to a person, me yelling could really, that social cue could amp them up and think that they are going to be attacked, right? That feels violent, even though it's not. So the impacts on domestic violence on folks is this is just a tiny piece, but it really stresses the importance of the healing that needs to happen. I will like to remind folks, and I'm sure that people will talk about it, but it does take an average of 7 attempts for a survivor to leave their abuser and stay separated for good. So that's huge. It's 7 attempts. And there's many, many different reasons why. It has nothing to do with weakness or vulnerability, but it literally, if you don't have the resources, if you are afraid, if you feel like you have nobody who can help you, many times going back into that violence feels safer than stepping out, not knowing who's there and who will catch you. Some final things are, if you are thinking about helping folks, finding someone or being that support for someone, or if you are in here today and you've navigated domestic violence, or you're in it right now, finding someone to confide in. It could be any one of us here on this panel, a trusted person. If you're able to have access to therapy, a therapist. If at all possible, being able to contact local and national agencies with resources and referrals. So I'm not necessarily talking about folks may not be at a place to report to the authorities, but just what are my resources, right? And figuring out what those national or local or even within your country resources are. If at all possible, creating a safety plan. And I think other folks might be able to talk a little bit about what that looks like, but it is, are you able to save money? What does that look like? Is there food? Do you have a place to go? And even just thinking about a plan to get out, even if you're not exactly sure what can be in that safety plan, starting to manifest it is helpful in thinking that there's something beyond, like I have hope somewhere else. And then for me, reminding people that you're actually not alone. It feels very isolating, as Catherine was talking about, but there are people here to help. So those are the pieces that I have. Of course, there's a lot more, but any questions after, of course. And I think Ida is next.
Catherine, do you want me to carry on? Catherine,
I'm
you're
sorry,
new.
I have to keep going through screens so I can unmute myself and then speak and then have you guys speak as well. Ida, just give me one moment. I have a follow-up question for Erin here. As a survivor of domestic violence, I can relate with all the things that you just mentioned here. Now, the only thing that I didn't know then is that this is where it would lead me. Right now, let me just even go through the list. Major depressive disorder. Depression is a thing. And back then, I didn't think it was depression, but somehow it gets to the extent of suicidal thoughts. I've thought those things. I reached that point as well where you're constantly hurt by somebody that you give your trust, that when you share it, like coming back from Uganda, nobody believes you. Because I wanted to ask you this: what is the nature of an abuser? Erin, if you can point that out. Because what I would find hard is that trying to convince people that my significant other is an abuser, because he's a very good person towards other people. It's like there's that thing. He was likable. Everybody's like, no way. Even when I say it now, people are like, no way. He was so nice. He gave us gifts. He gave us this. But you're the person in the relationship. You're the only one who knows how extreme this person can be. So if you want to mention that quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I think it is very different for many people in when you're thinking about the individual as the abuser. So I think, and this is just in speaking about men. So we know that women are also abusers, and if anybody is in a same-sex relationship, we know that that also happens as well. So I'm not excluding that at all, but just thinking right now, what we're talking about is when men are abusing women in this case. But it's a power thing. It's a power play, right? So folks really wanting in needing that power, toxic masculinity plays a huge role in it. I think in some communities it's also cultural, that it is cultural inappropriate and acceptable that men abuse their wives, their partners, their women. And because everybody hides it, then it allows the people, the abuser, to think that it's okay and that they can get away with it. So once something is happening in an abuser, a narcissist, it doesn't matter who you are, but when you are participating in behaviors like that and you're getting away with it, it encourages the abuser to continue with that behavior. There is a lot of different reasons why. It could be cycles of abuse that happened to a person, and those cycles of abuse are continued within. And I think a lot of times people don't want to talk about what that looks like, but I wonder if for many people, I think about that saying, like, all the women in me are tired. And that means, like, generationally, my ancestors are tired because the women have come from abusive situations to where I am, to where my mom was, to where my grandmother was, to where I am and what I left to be in a relationship now. So there is a lot of intergenerational trauma that also contributes to why folks abuse, but then also why we stay in those abusive situations as well. So those are just like, some very small examples.
Okay, and then we had a question from Jackie, though she's showing up as Catherine here. How do we
Okay.
navigate with trauma, or if we identify someone with trauma, how do you navigate that?
So trauma lives in the body, and in which you would hear folks saying in that somatic way. So there needs to be some significant healing that needs to take place, and sometimes that is therapy that is more than talk therapy. So some people have used EMDR, which is eye desensitized rap. I'm not saying the names right. I'm totally messing them up. But also talking about it, sitting with people, and being in therapy is a way to navigate through that trauma. But again, because it's in the body, folks need to do some somatic work when they're thinking about some of the post-traumatic stress syndrome and the trauma that goes along with that.
I will also comment about substance use because this is something I relate to. I constantly resorted to alcohol, became a huge alcoholic, it was easier for me. It was like, oh my God, just drink it off, go to sleep. That's another day. So I kind of relate to this. Sometimes we don't know. It could be a drink a day. It turns into 2 drinks, 3 drinks. Before you know it, you're stuck onto substance abuse. And when we say substance, we don't mean drugs. We mean alcohol, something that you use that gives you a different feeling from what you would usually feel. That is a substance. But also, you mentioned something to do with the feelings in the body, because I can also relate to that. I'm sorry, I'm sharing because I know sometimes this topic can be a little hard for people to come out, but I'm only sharing scenarios because in case it's happening to you, you will relate to what I'm talking about. I constantly got that fear that would go straight to my stomach and I have to run quickly to the bathroom. I was surprised that you mentioned that because I've felt that as well.
Yeah. Well, and when you're talking about the substance use disorder, you're also catching the euphoria. So, Catherine, when you gave your example, it was getting away, but it also gave you feelings that you were unable to feel on your own. So, a lot of times that also manifests in like pulling hair, cutting, right? Like some people will sneak out and have a lot of sex, right? So it's like you're wanting to get out of the feeling that you feel of terror and or being scared or anxiety or whatever that is. And many times it is whatever feeling can give you that euphoric feeling to get you out of that fear. And drinking is and that alcohol is what most people have access to.
Mm-hmm. And then what would you recommend? Because I've seen, I use myself as an example. I've seen that I constantly am looking over my shoulder, even when I'm away from my abuser. It's like if I'm in the parking garage by myself, it's like, where is he? Even in my mind, I know maybe he's not here, but somehow, for some reason, I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. Is that a thing that you could give a quick fix for, or would you recommend? What would you recommend?
There is no quick fix. I think because if you are socialized as a woman in this world, you have to watch your back, right? So
Yeah.
we have been raised to do that, and it doesn't matter where you are. We are looking behind us.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the added trauma, it feels more exasperated. So you're starting to, like, if I'm just walking with my keys, it's going to feel very different because I'm going to the car. But when my trauma comes in, it's because I was physically assaulted from behind and I'm afraid someone's going to see me. And that's the physical response that you're feeling. And that's where, you all might be like, Erin, I don't want to do it, but that's where counseling comes in. Because there you are working through some of those significant traumas with somebody. Doing that by yourself is really hard. Not to say it's impossible. It's not impossible, but many of us don't know how to do that. It is finding a professional who can help you through some of the deeper trauma that you feel kind of every day. so it's a mixed, it's a question that doesn't have a like a correct answer, because Catherine, I would never say to you, put your guard down. I don't think that you should put your guard down, right? But like, how can we make it so that you don't feel so triggered? That's what you would need to work on.
Okay. And like I don't know if you guys are able to see the chat, but if you do have a question and you're not comfortable unmuting and asking, Erin has about 15 minutes to go. You can just shoot the question in the chat. I will ask her. Speaking of being able to access some of these services, in some environments we're not able to. That is where Erin says, speak to somebody. Find somebody that you can speak to. I can tell you one thing for sure, and I always smile about this because I never took it seriously. I had a group of friends, and they kept me sane somehow, because every time I would go out and share my, I come with such a terrible story, and at the end of the day, we've laughed about it. We used to say that we laugh about it, we drink on it, and that's how it went away. It kept me going a day, the next day, and I was able to survive this abuse. But also just sharing with them, when you constantly share with them, they get to notice when it's now worse. You can start off by saying, oh my God, I got a slap. Tomorrow you're like, I got a kick. And then you have a black eye. And then they're like, lady, okay, now we can no longer laugh about this. We need to get help. So if you share with somebody's going to know your limits. There's going to be something that triggers some other person that will be like, nope, 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 not anymore. You need to get out of this. That is how I ended up where I am right now, because someone talked some sense into me. No, it's been 10 years of back and forth. You've reached the last point of your, abuse. I was one of those people who waited until the end, like Erin said, 7, 10 years. But it doesn't mean that I didn't see it. I saw it in the beginning, but there's this thing, lastly, Erin, about hoping that your person will change. It's a thing, right? You think, oh my God, let me help them. Maybe they are suffering from something. Maybe they have childhood trauma that I can, what do you think about that, Erin?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about that cycle of abuse, it's literally a cycle, Catherine, because there's hope. You fell in love with this person. This person is usually also incredibly charismatic, right? So you see them treating other people so well, and there's a little piece of hope that you think you're going to treat me that well too.
Mm-hmm.
And the literal when you are in an abusive situation in that way, your self-consciousness or self-confidence also leaves. So, you are at the lowest point in your life, and this person is the only person who seems to be there for you, even though they're your abuser. You still are attached to that person. It's like that Stockholm syndrome that actually happens, and why it makes it why 7 times people don't usually end up leaving. And unfortunately, sometimes women don't get to the 7th time because it's too late. And I think it's important to remember that as we're talking about this, to honor those folks as well.
Definitely agree with you, Erin. Some people have not made it. There's some numbers out there. You even know some people just in your environment that you've heard about. It comes as a story, but you have to think there are people who have been forgiving, who have gone through the 7, maybe 6th time, and the 7th time was not quite successful. I personally came to a near-death experience, so I'm speaking from experience. Yes, sometimes it can go to death. And for the other person, I always say that other person has things to deal with. You have no responsibility trying to figure that out. That is one thing that we all get tied into. Oh my God, he's the father of my kids. Oh my God, we've been married 5 years. No, sometimes it's you that you have to think about. What about me? Because sometimes we forget ourselves. Thank you, Erin. I will let you go. That was absolutely amazing. Hopefully, we can be able to continue to call you into, just to help. And also, if you need Erin's contact, please reach out to me. we can have you connect with her. You can start some therapy sessions with her. She's really amazing. Let's start working through some of these problems. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Next up, we're going to be talking to Miss Ida. I just moved my slides real quickly. Let me just go back. Miss Ida Bukubuza, and I'll let her introduce herself. She's a personal friend of mine, but she's doing some amazing things with women violence advocacy, all those things that we all need to get on. We need to get into doing, because we have to be the voices for other people. If you have that opportunity, if you're being abused, you need to step up and speak. If you're not being abused and you know somebody else, be the voice for somebody. It doesn't mean put them online. It means find them some help. Let them connect them to people like me who have been there, or maybe Erin, Ida, Jackie, somebody, people who are running organizations that can help some of the people who are currently in abuse. Miss Ida Bukubuza, you're welcome. You can take it on from here.
Well, thank you very much. It's actually almost 11 p.m. in Uganda. My name is Ida Bukubuza, and I do work with Idea Gender and Technology Initiative. It's an organization that works at the intersection of gender and technology, specifically working around digital advocacy, digital activism, and digital transformation for social change in different areas. And I'm so happy because October is Mental Health Awareness Month. And just like Catherine mentioned earlier on, the line to join into digital advocacy actually aligned with her story, because I knew her before she came to the United States. And I was wondering, as a person who is into the tech ecosystem, how best can we utilize tech opportunities to see challenges as well as to see opportunities to see social change. So my entire career works around digital advocacy for social change, including, of course, obviously, the topic that we are discussing at hand in regards to the campaign launch of the domestic violence awareness. And I'm so happy and privileged and honored to be here. And without any further ado, I'm so going to talk about what we call technology facilitated gender-based violence, as well as cyberbullying, which is one of the many forms of technology facilitated gender-based violence or online gender-based violence. Briefly, I think there is not a time we can appreciate technology more than during COVID-19. How we had the lockdown, we learned to appreciate technology in all areas and spheres of work, and the way we live, the way we work, the way we literally do everything in today's changing world of work. Technology is here to stay as an enabler, to give us opportunities, but as well as to change and challenge the status quo in different arenas, as well as to look at it as a double-edged sword, because perpetrators are actually shifting their alignment, their energy, their powers to think that right now to go digital or virtual. I'll give you an example or a scenario. In 2018, I think in UN Women Uganda, we had a conversation ahead of 16 days of activism, and I'm loving the campaign again because November 25th to December 10th, the UN allowed us to have a voice, a shout, to add voices to all over the world about gender-based violence, including domestic violence as one of the forms of GBV. So, and in that particular call, in terms of 16 days of activism, it shows and calls, it's like an affirmative action, allowing us and reminding us as women, advocates, activists, users of all different platforms and tools to be aware that actually these things are happening. So ahead of this campaign, I'm happy that you're actually fronting this ahead of time. So back to 2018, the UN Women in Uganda had a debate on how best can we talk about different forms of violence. Catherine already shared in the previous slides about, different ones, sexual, physical. But evolution in terms of bridging the gender digital divide gap or the digital gap, regardless of the gender and, sex orientations and ethnicity. People are using technology to enable themselves in the field of work. Commerce, for people in the United States, you're contactless in literally everything. Your life is actually digital. Mm-hmm. So what perpetrators learned that because the definitions of domestic violence were majorly showing wounds, give us proof. A young woman comes out to talk about rape, even the reporting and the referral pathways were very unclear, and they were more traumatizing and more degrading and bringing shame to women. You bring in your daughter who is raped or defiled, and they ask you, how did he do it? You're asking an 8-year-old. So there was a lot of shyness and shame behind reporting. So the referral system was not helping. And for those that went ahead to be referred, there was a lot of shame and back and forth and, killing of, evidence and testimonies. So we progressed in 2019 and 2018, and people were using a lot of tech for work. And I think the epitome of tech being used literally for everything was 2019, 2020 during the COVID pandemic. We saw people going behind keyboards, abusing women. In Uganda, we had the general election and the pre-election in 2020, and the voting was done in the January of 2021. And I remembered one of the press releases and the conference directive from the president of the country asking people to use online platforms for campaigns. Unfortunately, women contenders, especially in media and politics, are not very tech savvy. So there was a lot of gaps in terms of competence and digital literacy, where perpetrators were targeting and being intentional about cropping, this is Catherine's face, but then they will degrade your body because they know when we talk about social norms on how they define a respected woman MP. And then the below body is actually not your body. But to a layman, when it leaks out into, people are having access to mobile phones and everything, they will not debunk and fact check that. They will look at, this is Catherine putting on a bikini and she's going to be our woman MP in this particular district, for example. So back to the topic on why technology facilitated gender-based violence is very key for us to look at it as another form of gender-based violence. And I'll give you a brief description of what it means actually, not different from what you've already had. However, it is, I have very few notes here to just run you through quickly. So or tech facilitated violence, mainly through forms of online, platforms, tools, devices, and etc. So it is used to abuse and exploit women majorly. I'm not saying men are not abused, but looking at statistic levels, and we've had debates and campaigns where people always say, oh, why do you always think gender-based violence is about women? But also men suffer and other genders do suffer. But we look at it at the gravity and the magnitude of the statistics. Who is highly abused according to record, not to dismiss the effects of other people who suffer the same kind of abuse. But we look at it at the number and attention for us to have affirmative action in that regard. So even men do face a lot of gender-based violence and technology-facilitated violence as one of the forms of GBV. So they will use harmful tools, definitely language exploitation, and with emerging technologies versus established technologies being the other forms of tech, but with emerging tech, we look at, for example, AI, whereby someone can fake a video, deep fakes, recrop you into a particular video so that they can, pursue and push whatever agenda they want or narrative they want to make an interpretation of you. So if you're a person of interest to that particular perpetrator, they'll do run a particular video to assume and pose you to be the kind of person they want to shame you to the public or to intentionally exploit and harm your personality. So often targeting people based on their gender, like Catherine shared earlier in terms of the general GBV, the gender identity, ethnicity, sex orientation, etc. So tech-facilitated violence, one of the biggest forms of tech-facilitated violence or online gender-based violence is actually cyberbullying. Like Catherine shared, sometimes it starts as a joke. Like someone will tell you, oh, you're fat, and you're like, no, but I was joking, Before you know it, it will put you, for some people, it threatens their full potential from using digital platforms, social media, because of the constant reminders of how people choose to describe certain people. In Uganda, we've had quite a number of targeted abuse to different young women, majorly those in limelight. I'm certain we have seen videos of, intentional targeted videos to talk about IPV, which is intimate partner violence in terms of non-consensual images and intimate images, or what we call revenge pornography. We saw videos of Desire Luzinda. We saw videos of, Judith Hard. We've seen videos of different people. Yeah. And I'm glad with the Puff Daddy OPDD scenarios coming out right now, showing how much record and a digital footprint can come out to either give us an opportunity to seek justice, but also to see how much we need to protect our lives online, because you do not know when it's going to sprout out, and people will probe deeper until when they get to the bottom of that. So it is a lesson, like I shared earlier on, as a double-edged sword. It could be for your digital footprint, but also to, have some kind of data privacy and protection of what you want to do on camera or the internet, because it does never forget. So yeah, so cyberbullying in short, like highlighted here, it is, one second. Yeah, refers to the use of digital, technologies, social media platforms, tools, messaging apps, and we have quite a lot. Literally every eco sector or any sector right now, from banking to agriculture to education to health, everything and everywhere you go, everything is being digitalized. So it is literally anything whereby you have chatbots, you have humans over behind and over text, always seeking for verification. We cannot deny the fact or dismiss the fact that we are actually in a digital ecosystem. This is going to stand, it's going to emerge with AI. How best can we work to make sure we coexist with these kinds of tools? Because technology is just an enabler. I always tell people it is ICT, information, communication, and technology, where tech comes last as an enabler. But whatever they have to assess is between the I and C, and the I is for information and the C for communication. So what is it as this campaign is talking about in terms of launching the DV awareness? What is it that we information out there, the communication flow, while using technology as an enabler? Looking at this particular conversation right now, TechSoup here is enabling us to actually have these voices heard, helping us record so that we can go beyond just our, geographical, location. So tech is here to stay, to enable us, but also we need to recognize how best, can we stand in and navigate the harmful, intentional, targeted things majorly in regards to women over men. Yeah. So back to what I was talking about earlier on, in terms of why were the most common places where cyberbullying comes in, or why it stays. I remember at the beginning of 2021, we had a Me Too campaign. And I'm glad this campaign can also be like that, to go viral, to have everybody talk about a lot of stuff. The Me Too campaign did not discriminate where you are, but people kept on sharing stories of abusers. And people were given a chance, platforms give us chances to be anonymous in case you're afraid, We saw people call out people like Denzel from TV. I think, Kate, you remember those kinds of campaigns. And they were run using Twitter by that time, for now, which is now, X. So these particular platforms have also given us a chance to go an extra mile in terms of privacy. These days, because now they acknowledge that someone cannot, from your definition that you shared earlier on in regards to GBV, you talked about the physical ability, but also sometimes it's not visible. You may not be in the same eco-living space with someone, but does not mean they cannot actually infringe and hurt you and mentally distort your ways of life. We have seen people texting. You talked about stalking. Cyber stalking is a very big thing. You be somewhere and then someone is sending a picture, I have seen where you've been. That's all looking over your shoulder, like no one is going to tell you to put your guard down, but you will be somewhere and then someone texts you and tells you, Catherine, I'm seeing you, or Jacqueline, I'm seeing you, you're seated, let me say you're seated at Rotisserie in Vermont and something. So with technology being an enabler, you could be on your phone, a train or somewhere, and someone is literally recording your moves. So these are things that we need to keep in mind to understand actually it is happening. And I'm glad that the UN actually, in the recent UN summit during UNGA, the Future of Summit, put the Global Digital Compact. And one of the key themes they talked about was digital rights. And they considered digital rights as a human right. So in Uganda, we had a gap in regards to how we did the referral pathway and the reporting to get response. They would ask, but you have no harm. When Judith Hard went to police to talk about the nudes, in fact, the Minister of Ethics and Integrity wanted to recall why she actually had to share the nudes. But I'm glad that women activists and other organizations came out and said, Do you think this woman was having these nudes by herself? Clearly, there was an intimate kind of engagement under consent. How people choose to live their sex life should not be a crime of a woman, because you're giving this service, even if you're a sex worker, to another party. So can we call all those body counts to be in here who claim to have seen her naked? Yeah, because there is no way she was taking those those pictures. Someone was targeting and intentional to use it against her. And I'm glad that the women activists in Uganda came out and talked about these things, that we should stop victim blaming and look at solutions on how to help people, regardless in what form. What you call that, maybe she was not beaten or anything, but she has children and she has a life to enjoy sex in whatever way. And I remember in the argument from, I think, FIDA Uganda, they said just because behind closed doors, some of you are somersaulting, some of you are doing all acrobatics in terms of pleasure. And it's a right as long as it's under consent. So just because you do not have, you're not under surveillance, should not make it, you should not make it about another woman, be another victim of non-consensual images, which is revenge pornography. And I think conversations over time have evolved to make sure that women have a right to talk about these things and also report these kinds of abusers, much as they're not very physical in terms of contact, but they can affect their mental well-being. We've seen people who have been sacked off TV or jobs because of such, information or leaks and everything. So it's about time that we probe deeper and look at these things on how they can affect women more than men. And even when the videos leak and come out with the men, the level of shame on women versus men, again, it takes us why we call it gender-based violence, looking at the women as the majority versus the men. So it is a statistical level, not because we want to dismiss that men are not also abused. And then also we are living in an area where we have mainstream media versus social media. In Uganda, or in very many, I think all over the world, we have quite a lot of self-imposed journalists, and which are called bloggers, influencers. Anyone can report, and we have quite a lot in terms of access and flow of information. We have a gap in terms of credibility, in terms of sources, and in terms of misinforming and disinforming the public and masses. So what we can recall to be true by the fact you debunk and fact check this kind of information might have already been viral, and you don't have the capacity to recall where this video, for example, has gone. I can tell you most have at least 10, or even if it's just 5 WhatsApp groups where you're about at least 80 people plus. Imagine if those videos have gotten into those 5 WhatsApp groups and this is just one of the many platforms that there is in the social, in the technology ecosystem. How many people have seen out of the 5 WhatsApp groups, there are 80, and also they are also in other WhatsApp groups that you may not be involved in. So you cannot debunk and check out this particular digital print and recall it back. But what do we say in terms of all these things? Can we have legal frameworks, to recall and be, when a woman talks about, I was abused sexually and my videos, I'm suspecting my partner, and they call them to book, instead of making fun and jokes about it. I'm glad that we had a session with Erin of Health. People break down. We are, for example, living in Uganda is in global south, and we are living in a third world country. And we are looking at technology as an enabler. So when there are these particular threats, how are we going to bridge that gap if there are things that are resonating and threatening women's full potential to actually tap into the opportunities of tech? People are not afraid to use tech. They are willing to, but circumstances and scenarios of threat like this threaten their full potential. Like, oh no, I don't want to post my picture. So how are they going to, utilize and also tap into the opportunities that there is for tech to support us in the economic growth? We are talking about gender equality, digital equity, and COVID, again, as an example, gave us an opportunity. Women can get jobs all over the world and work home. But if you're not competent digitally and digitally literate, you're not going to tap into these ecosystems. And when you look at the goal 8 in terms of sustainable development goals that talks about economic development and growth of women, these are tools and resources they are talking about that can boost and accelerate and advance women's full potential. So if there are things that are going to limit our full potential in terms of fear, then we are going to stay in the line of poverty forever. Then we are going to have concerns in terms of gender equality. The inequalities are going to be high, yet we are supposed to be enjoying these particular opportunities. So, and just to give you other forms of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, beyond just cyberbullying and stalking, spreading of rumors. Someone makes a hashtag and intentionally, we've seen bloggers write about different stories and tag everybody because they have a like, they're just working it for a like and whatever. You know, someone wants to create a story and because they want likes and comments and new followers, by the time you debunk, someone has lost a family. Yeah, so there is also online harassment, constant abuse of how people look. You know, she's fat, she's ugly, she's this, those constant abuse under comments where you post your picture and people are intentional to call you all kinds of names, you know. Then we have the non-consensual, the NCI, which is sharing of intimate. Oh, thank you. Yeah, the non-consensual is the same as revenge pornography. It is always targeted. So how do we do best? Because you don't have control on how you want to enjoy your sex life to be on a watch. So when it happens, can we be intentional and normalize to back up women who suffer such kinds of, you know, and be like, no, let's also call the men out who leak these particular images. There is no way someone can record themselves. There is someone, can we also track them down? Or can we allow and be that listening here? If someone tells you, I think this particular day, because you know how you addressed, I was with Ida. I'm suspecting Ida to have made that video out of me. Can we bring them to punishment and normalize punishment or into legal, you know, ways to make sure that there is fairness and justice? Then there is stalking and monitoring. Kate already mentioned about this earlier on, whereby someone stalks you physically, but these days people will stalk you online. They tag you, someone is actually literally watching you wherever you go. And then we have deepfakes, and this goes under emerging technologies. There is so much that is going on. You wake up one day, there is this buzzing trend, you know, you're looking like this. We've seen how AI is making transformative, you know, actions in terms of approaches and productivity. But again, we have seen how AI is depriving us of our human rights and digital rights. So we do not take that for granted in today's changing world of work, which is very technologically enabled. So it will happen. If it can give you efficiency and productivity levels higher and ease, that means it can also duplicate and do an identity theft on you. So the impact of cyberbullying, generally, mental health issues. Every time, and it's very worse when it comes to technology-facilitated gender-based violence, because you do not know how much it has gone beyond just your reach. Maybe if you're in a physical environment where they tell maybe your mother-in-law, your sisters, and everyone is telling you, by the way, your husband or your wife is saying this about you. When someone exposes you digitally, you have no control over that. Your digital footprint could be in the, we are right now speaking to people in LA. I know you're in the next to, you're in a different part of the world, you know. We do not know how many other people who are on the call where they are based right now. So recalling that is quite different. And it can, you know, get down to you into PTSD. Erin already suicidal thought. You gave us a clear example, and I'm a living, you know, example to acknowledge that. And you're such a strong person, Catherine. So it also threatens you from using these particular platforms, which we call social withdrawal. And at the same time, when you deprive someone of what they want to do, you're forcing them and infringing on their human rights. And like I shared earlier on, the UN declared digital rights as a human right. So anything that is forcing you out of things that you must enjoy, that is depriving that, you know, effort, is actually depriving you of a human right and social, you know, interaction. And then lastly on that part is silencing of voices. Every time there is a threat, like who are you to talk about? We've seen, I'll give an example. Last year, there is a journalist in Uganda, Bahati. She called out the first son. It was on Twitter. It's logical, it's not a hearsay. He went ahead and said he had visited a nearby country. And young women visited, came with flowers and everything. And this is to put on record, it was the first son of the President of the Republic of Uganda, and that is General Muhoozi. And then he started sexualizing them, saying they have nyash under his official handle, including some MPs like David Kavanda, saying, yeah, well endowed. These are men who are supposed to be in public, who are on a high level in terms of power, and they were calling out women in terms of sexualization, sexism, and figuring them out on how they look like. Remi Bahati goes on under that same tweet and says, a person of your caliber, it's good to appreciate beauty, but calling out women in terms of catcalling, yeah, is inappropriate and is not giving a good image for the young boys who look up to power. How are they supposed to behave if someone brought them to court? His response was to Bahati, is it because you're ugly and no one hits on you? And this is on social platforms and digital platforms. So what does this mean? So when a person in leadership position like that is going to leave a trail of others to adapt, the way the term about role modeling and who is going to follow your in whatever your footprint. If an MP or a president's son can say things like that, how about a street boy? What is he going to do? He's going to catcall women, you know, sexualize them at ease, because that is what is being put as pace. So it is very, very important to seek out and disregard such comments and call those things out. And just to wrap up quickly, so in terms of like that, so he was intentional but fortunate enough about digitalization and digital advocacy and activism. Other women who and activists saw these particular tweets and actually recalled him, and he deleted the tweet. But it was already viral. People had taken screenshots of it. So it's about silencing voices. The same way Catherine said, share this campaign, maybe to add another voice to another voice. It is upon us to have our voices heard in such scenarios so that even those that are standing for us are not discouraged to carry on. There was a video of one of our former ministers in Uganda, I think it was Honorable Matembe. We know how these people were stereotypes during their time in service in terms of power. They called out all bad behavior, called out and gave affirmative action in terms of, you know, for example, for rapists, they should be castrated. And they were heard because they had a backup. But imagine if she said these things in public or on TV when she was in term of office and power, and everyone shut her down. We stand now to have voices right now because there were women like her who went before us, so that we can also have this deliberate effort to add another voice. So it is upon us to do this strategic and multiplying effect power, so that we add our voices to these particular campaigns, so other people, our children and our girls who are going to come after us, find these things on record and they can use them as citations and reference for the work they have to do. Because some people have to go before us. We've, for example, Black history. Women who have gone into, you know, power. We've had movies about the Shirleys in terms of, you know, first woman Congress for you people in the United States. Certain women today can stand proud to be like, if so-and-so did it, so can I. Yeah, so such scenarios. And lastly, I don't know how much time I have, Catherine, but I think I have one more slide here on my side to share. So some of the contributing factors that we could use in regards to how best can we deal with cyber harassment or cyberbullying or cyber stalking and this whole online gender-based violence. One of the key things is legal framework. We need to call people, starting from the internet service providers, and I'm glad and applaud most of the social service providers, the platforms that have gone and given us extra steps on how to be better users of these online platforms like Twitter, X, and everything. We have now a right. If you have an abuser, you can delete a comment, you can block them. You know, before then, there were not these efforts. So probably because of the voices and the continuous reports, people
Yes.
and this, you know, have given us the chance to have this ability for us to be in control, even when it's not enough. For countries like Uganda, I will use Uganda as one of the key things. We still have a struggle when it comes to legal frameworks. They don't feel so much that actually tech facilitated online gender-based violence is harmful, but I'm glad that it's actually happening in Parliament. We saw people like Samantha and people were calling out justice for Samantha until when it started pinching into them. I always pray that if you have so much doubt in something, I pray it happens to you. Then you will understand the gravity, so that you can have affirmative action in that regard. So, and now, right now,
Thank you, Ida. I was just saying thank you. I have a quick question before you leave us, before we wrap up your session. I was taking some notes on some of the things you shared. I know that we are somehow indirectly not aware of how much harm we are doing. So when we hear cyberbullying, we do not consider ourselves a part of that. But I want to ask a question. I just want to put a comment there so you can add on to that. When somebody posts a picture about, let me say, the scenarios that we've seen, Desire Luzinda, what is the young lady that is a comedian, a nude picture of somebody, how do you contribute as a person? Do you repost it? Do you tag it? Do you share it in these other 80 groups, 80 people that are in a different WhatsApp group? Is that considered being a part of cyberbullying?
Very much so, because if you're a part of a thread that is going to extend this information to go viral, then you're not helping the society. The same way we want information is supposed to be shared. Yes, it's there to be information. But when it happens to a woman where you see it is actually damaging and shaming that woman, don't be a part of the cycle that is making it to go to another group. I'm the kind of person, I don't receive people's nudes, and you know that. I don't have interest. They were not meant for me. I don't find it joyful when a woman shares their pleasure in their moment for me to find what is there for me to find in that pleasure. It was not meant for me. Clearly, it is very toxic. It is intended targeted abuse to hurt that particular person. So you sharing and resharing, you're making actually you more proud that actually it's even going viral. Unfortunately, people back here may not see that. And that's why I always say, I pray it happens to the person they are close to, maybe a sister, maybe their child. Then they will understand these voices, why people say, stop non-consensual intimate image sharing of other people's partners.
And coming to domestic violence, just the topic on cyberbullying, I have a most recent scenario. The former wife, I don't know if she's divorced, you can correct me, but the former wife to a very current popular singer, Chameleon, his wife, Daniela, she came out to speak about abuse. And I think you guys can all relate on the comments that came below some of the things that she shared. So much that she recently took down all her posts, all of them on Instagram. How do you think she got there? Can you just comment a bit about that, Ida? Then we can wrap up this session.
Thank you for bringing it up. Those are the things that we look about silent voices. It is targeted. We all know who Chameleon is back in Uganda. He's a very powerhouse, he's a mentor to many other people, which is very difficult sometimes for when people are wearing shoes that represent them in different ways. The same scenario shared that they are so good to other people. So clearly that is a clear information that there is threat behind that. And there are also scenarios of how people think, oh, she's the mother of or the father of your children. He bought you a car, he bought you a house. My friend, you deserve those because you gave them children. Don't be very apologetic on what you have to offer or what you receive as a titled wife to any of these kind of things to suffer violence in your marriages or in your relationship. So for me, those are the things that we look at silencing voices. And I want to applaud some of the Ugandan community and many activists. Much as she had both backlashes, because that is a typical backlash, idea of a backlash, digital backlash, the threats, but also there was some encouragement to many young musicians, people who want to marry in such ecosystem, to understand the kind of things that can arise. We saw the same family having a brother who almost killed one of the Rwandan girls, Sandra. Much as the story, she was recalled to be brought in Uganda, but we know back in the mind that people had conversations to say, probably she's being silenced. Maybe she's living under fear. Like you said, it can take you years for you to realize this. These are efforts, and such campaigns are voices to allow people normalize to know they are not alone, but they can speak out. They can sometimes be threatened. They can be, afraid. But when they speak, they can even rebound and backlash and go back to these relationships, even when we walk. But are we the same kind of people who are going to say, but Catherine, we talked about this. Why dare you go back? We do not know the gravity of love these people have. Erin shared it clearly that sometimes you trust and have a little hope that they might change. So let's not be the judges of why this particular person is still having this mighty hope on this person. forgetting they are also their partners. Maybe they have this particular little doubt, and allow them to go through the process, but while helping them and maybe giving them constructive and positive feedback so that they can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you, Ida. I hope this has been a very an eye opener, because she had some powerful information in there. If you or somebody that you know has been unaware of kind of the effect you have on somebody else when you post, when you make a vague comment, do know that those things actually harm people indirectly or directly. Some people feel like that example I just gave. I was actually trying to reach out to Daniela to come here and kind of be one of our speakers, but I feel like we have said, we go through phases. I have been through those phases. It's a whole, it could take you years. For some people have been lucky and gone out early enough. Some people, we've said, have not made it. Some people are still dealing, and we have to be aware of other people's trauma. Please do not be that person who makes the comment. Do not be that person who has a voice on something negative that you don't know about. Be the person who's the encouraging, the person who's trying to save lives, that person who's positive. Hear your friends, speak to them, do not judge, because these are real things. Don't be that person who's like, oh my God, you brought it upon yourself. You knew this guy from the beginning. Nobody ever knows. No one ever knows. We just fall in love, or with our different partners. Before we know it, some are successful, some are not. But if they are not, that is what it is. No shaming, no calling out people. That was about cyberbullying. I am going to be closing
Can
this
I wrap
session.
something up? One minute, Kate. What's like 30 seconds, please?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So how do I address these things? I have just 5 points, and I'll do them quickly as bullet points. Education and awareness. Let's promote and be intentional. Seek out people. Seek out funders to help us, have these agendas pushed forward. Number 2, strengthen legal protection. If you're a lawyer, ecosystem, you work in, a legal framework, can we front these particular issues and also consider them as forms of gender-based violence? Then platform accountability for us, most of us who use social platforms and everything, be in charge and control of your privacy and protection to make sure when you have such concerns, you can report. Second but not least, seek out a social support system, both digitally, virtually. We already have women wealth gap, and we have Bernice Women and many that have been on the call, Erin and other people, actually community interventions. Let's have these talks normalized to a community level to show them that these things can actually happen. Thank you.
Yes, that is so true. What we are doing currently is a very good step in the right direction. Just having conversations about these things is also helpful. So once we're here, we're about 12 people. We're falling off and on in numbers, but that doesn't mean this is where it ends. This is where Ida was saying that digital technology is actually helpful. So people who are going to rewatch and watch this are going to be people who take in this information, and maybe it will save a life or two, or maybe hundreds. So domestic violence is a very huge problem. It has so many areas attached to it. And I've come to learn these as I go along, not just as a survivor, but as I've been speaking, because this is very, like I'd say, this is dear to my heart. So I've been talking to groups, I've been involved, we've been working constantly with people on this topic. And I learned that there's a big, big connection with abuse and economic abuse. So money, most people are kept in relationships because they're afraid of losing money, or because they don't even know how to address issues around money, because we have given this power to the other person, right? So you're in a relationship and everything of yours is done by this man or this woman, whoever you're in the relationship with. And then because of that, you're tied down. You cannot leave. You're abused in every single way because you're tied onto this relationship economically. And so one of the things that we are big on as Minority Wealth Gap and as Bernice Women is to empower women economically. So I'll just be talking about what kind of scenarios are tagged around economic abuse, which is a form of domestic violence. It's a form of domestic violence, and it includes a range of tactics that are used by an abuser to undermine the economic independence of a current or former partner in cases of divorce. When somebody is supposed to be co-parenting with you, they are holding funds and using money as a way to abuse you. So we are big on economic empowerment. It's an overarching theme that includes the following: an increase in financial literacy. That's one thing we are so invested in. We want people to be empowered financially. You need to understand, for the people who live in the US, your credit scores. How do you file your taxes? Be independent. How do I find a job? What does that job mean? What are the taxes? What are the resources available for me, so that you're not stuck in a relationship because you're afraid, when I leave this relationship, what are my children going to eat? If I go with my children, will I be able to take care of them? Things like that. So an increase in financial literacy, or the knowledge or skills to make sound financial decisions, and of course obtain resources. An improvement in economic self efficiency, or the belief that one has the resources, options, or confidence to be successful. The confidence part, that is very important, just to be confident enough to step out of a relationship that is abusive. Put in mind, abusive, we are not speaking about physical abuse. We're speaking about all the forms of abuse, the different types. Abusive, I mean, we just heard about cyberbullying, things like that. Somebody has your pictures and they are threatening you that if you leave me, I'm going to post them on social media. So you're stuck up in a relationship that is abusive because you're afraid of that. But again, economically unempowered. So you're like, if I step out of this relationship, what is day one going to be like? I was in that position. I really was. And I always wondered, will I be able to take care of my children? Am I going to be able to do this and that? I'm one of the lucky ones who was able to step out of a relationship up to this far where I am. But it didn't take that. I tried. I stepped out two blocks down the hall, 3 blocks down the hall. That did not work. That is how I ended up this far. But back to this, an improvement in economic, so an enhancement in economic self-sufficiency, or economic behaviors that demonstrate their economic efficacy, efficiency, or financial literacy regarding personal financial management. Often the vehicle to promote economic empowerment centers on financial literacy programs. Now, for Bernice in Uganda, when we started, that was also our goal. We actually did a project in the COVID times, where we empowered market women to learn how to do this stuff digitally, so they can use their phones to get customers, and not stuck up in a market waiting for their goods to be sold just so they can make money. So things like that, empowering people, learning new ways of making money that can make women in particular be self-reliant. For those survivors who do work, it's about 35% to 56% who have been reported that were harassed by their partners at their places of employment. That's also a thing. Somebody constantly coming to your employment, that keeping you in fear because you think they're going to come and embarrass you, or they're going to come and speak to your employer or your boss. In my personal scenario, there were things like, you need to put in a letter of resignation. That job needs to end. You need to stay home. Some kind of, threatening like that, right? And it leads to, you're going to die. If you don't do it, I'm going to kill you. These things are real. Economic empowerment, economic abuse is very real. Not even having money to make a phone call. We have heard of those scenarios. There's a thing that they say in Uganda: just because they're behind the fences doesn't mean life is good. It's very true. So many women are stuck in their homes without even a call. They can't even make a call to a friend or family. They don't have that money. They have been cut off economically to that level. 55% to 85% reported being late. Imagine that scenario, leaving early or missing work completely as a result of abuse. You're in fear. Otukadi, what time are you getting here? You know, you're forced to run away from work. So that means you cannot perform, you cannot deliver because you're in fear of your other person who's constantly saying, where have you been? What have you been doing? Reporting late, delayed tactics. We know these things. That is when, somebody is saying they're sick. Every time, constantly, you're reporting late. It affects your finances and in the end, abuses you economically. So some of the people, 24% to 52% have reported losing their jobs as a result of abuse. If you don't know that, that is also a thing. Since work is often tied to economic empowerment, understanding how abusers interfered with work is one step to understanding economic abuse. So some people always hear economic abuse and don't know what that means. It means everything that is done to make sure that you don't have that job, everything that is done to make sure that that job ends, that is abuse. Everything that is done to steal your finances, there's also theft. It can include economic exploitation, economic control. Items for economic control by partners include doing things like keeping you from going to your job, threatening you to make you leave work, or keeping financial information from you, stealing your property. That is a thing. Gambling your money or shared money. You wake up one morning and that joint account, all gone. Economic abuse. Women have been identified as a group that has limited financial literacy. So our goal as Minority Wealth Camp is to make sure that we know our finances, not only understand them, count, do the homework, be invested in it, learn how you can better yourself economically. Those are some of the issues. And for me, that's a dear topic because, like I had said earlier, Ida, who shared before, she's one of my friends. I remember one time she used to work and I was stuck home. But I would like to take this opportunity to thank her because she never gave up on me. She kept coming from work and, bringing me 10,000, 20,000. And it up to today, I'm appreciative of that. An example of what you can do to help somebody in an
Dollars.
abusive relationship. Sorry?
$10,000 and $20,000.
What can I do if I'm in an abusive relationship? What can you do? It's important to know the signs of intimate partner violence. There are signs. Sometimes we just choose not to see them. If you're feeling unsafe in your relationship for any reason, first of all, it's not your fault. And it's important that you reach out for help. Talk to a trusted person outside your home. Erin shared that. You can use a nurse, a social worker, a clergy person. Most times back home we have sengas. They don't stop at that. They don't stop at bringing you to the man. These are the kind of things that they're supposed to help you with. Speak to her and be like, you know what, this is, I don't think this is right. This is, have somebody be your voice if you cannot be a voice. A clergy person, or just in general, and this could work mostly for the people who are in the US. Contact your local domestic prevention center or shelter. And of course, if you're in immediate danger, you have to call the police. You have to. In Uganda, like Ida had shared, it is very, very hard. I lived that. I know it. I cannot tell you the number of times I ran to the police and nothing came out of it. So much as it's the case, it doesn't mean that you cannot do it. You have to, it can be, you could be the different story. You could be the one who gets that police officer who resonates with you. But also just having it on record and just the other person knowing that you took that step could be a bit of safety for you as you think about other plans. Erin had mentioned always have an emergency plan. What is your emergency plan? Where am I going? Do I have the funds? Do I at least have transport to move me and my children from this point to this point? Some of the things you can do if you're in an abusive relationship, being aware of it and making steps to prepare for worst case scenarios. When making calls or using the internet, this goes to digital divide. Keep in mind that controlling partners often monitor phones, the phone, web activity of their partners. You should also know where you keep important documents, other essential items, in case you need to leave in a hurry. In most times, you have to leave in a hurry. Always, when you're in an abusive relationship. But do you have that suitcase packed just in case of an emergency if things go the wrong way? But at the end of the day, no matter what situation you're in, know that there is hope. There is always hope. And that's our message with this campaign. There is always hope. Recovery from the effects of violence is possible. It just begins with reaching out. You have to reach out. You have to ask for help, ask for support. Get that person, that one person who's going to be like, I got you. Many survivors find safety and go on to have healthy relationships. I want to say I am still working through my issues because, like we'd said earlier on, mental health is an aspect we are not used to. I'm just getting to understand that mental aspect. So things like watching over my shoulder, those are after effects. Things I'm seeing much later that if I had gone out early, I would have avoided. Those are things we have to reach out for help. Some of the contacts that we have, for those of you who are in the US, National Youth Resources for Mental Health in America, at the end of the day, you'll be receiving this video, this recording, and just keep those contacts close to you. You need them. You never know when you're going to need this. When you're going to need this contact, just have it with you. Go in there and check out some of these numbers, phone calls that you can make to either get help or just to prevent or to deal with the after effects of abuse. So many other domestic violence, some other things connected to it, suicide prevention. When you talk about domestic violence, it involves some of these other things, child abuse. So many. You had Erin saying some people suffer so much they decide to take their lives and their children's lives. It's that bad. I can connect to some of these scenarios because I know some of the weird thoughts that came through my head when I was going through this. I felt like I wasn't heard. Nobody understood it. I'm better off leaving this world and not suffering this. But then at the end of the day, I'm accountable for 3 beautiful children. And I'm wondering if I leave, what happens to them? That means their life is going to be a mess, But there are resources that are available for you to use that can help you through some of these scenarios. We can be one of those contacts. Bernice Women, Minority Wealth Gap. We're just a phone call away. We can connect you to some of these amazing resources that we have on this side. So I'm speaking to the people on the US, but also the people in Uganda. You'll be amazed at how many people have their voices out there. We know so many resources that can be available for you. If you're in Uganda and you feel you need help, don't be afraid to reach out, get into our inboxes, text us. We will be there. Call to action. I'm just wrapping this up so I can have some minutes to get some questions if there are any questions. We have some things going on as Minority Wealth Gap. So we are actively working on this domestic violence agenda. We have to have the voice out there, not just for the US, but for Uganda as well. We are out there. We want to change this. Legal help, things like that. We can do that. We can connect you to people who can help you. Housing, those are some of the things we are focused on. Having that immediate shelter when somebody needs it. It's a thing that we are focused on as Minority Wealth Gap. So we are excited to announce some of our upcoming fundraisers. There's a dinner coming up, a silent auction that will be next year in November. That is 2025. We are going to be fundraising money to take on some of these challenges, to deal with domestic violence head on, be able to give resources to people who need them. So in that event, we're asking people to donate items and gifts so that we can auction them for in order to be able to get this money, that funds that we can use to keep pushing this agenda. So that is an event that is coming up, and if most importantly, if you know somebody, if you are in a situation of abuse, reach out, speak out, let your voice be heard. Join us on this call to action because it is very important and we have to get it done. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute, give us a question, or just raise your hand, or you can type in the chat and we'll get somebody to address that question, whoever it's intended to. I hope this has been informative. This is going to be just one of the so many sit downs we're going to have, just so we can address these skeletons. They're somewhere hiding, but we need to take them out. We need to bring them to light.
I did want to chime in there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, wow, I've learned so much. Every time I'm hanging around Bernice Women and all the contacts with Bernice Women, I am learning so much. I just wanted to say thank you to Ida, the previous presenter, Ms. Baker, and Catherine for being bold enough to come out and talk about this situation, which is violence. I think it's really the silence, the silos in our community, people suffering silently, and then we wake up and we hear, oh, someone got a heart attack and died, and you just think, okay, they're married, what and you don't know what's really happening in the homes. So we want to create a safe space where we can have people come up and communicate. If you notice, we love the TechSoup platform. It's because of that. We want protection. We want people to come in with intention of like learning something, right? And taking this back home. Thank you, Ellen. I see you. She's a big time community leader. She's one of the very big women holding a powerful group called BKI. We're so grateful to have you here. We hope that you can take this message to some of your constituents to tell them what we're trying to do here. We need more leaders to come up and like really have these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I think the next topic will still be virtual. The reason we're making it virtual is because we want to involve the Uganda group as well.
Mm-hmm.
Reinvent the wheel. We're really coming to a country where we're all one. So we have to think like that when we are doing these campaigns. Like you have to think on a global mindset. So we really appreciate everyone who was able to come. I know it's just like 10, but TechSoup is replaying this video to thousands of nonprofits, hoping that this message will go out. But my takeaway is, and this is a question that I have for Catherine and Ida, I know we're talking about violence in terms of families. We want to expand on that in terms of violence, in terms of communities, because there's a lot of community violence I see. And sometimes you're like, how do I even begin to address this? That is also a type of violence. Where I know Ida touched on some of that with the cyberbullying and everything. But sometimes people are unaware that they're being violent. And it's really, really, it's like you try to bring them on one-on-one and say, listen, they don't want to, like you said, Catherine, you're not being hurt, right? So sometimes it's like, okay, do you need a rude awakening as to your level of violence you're inflicting on people right now? So it's like that self-awareness that people are like, they don't know that they're being violent. And it's like, you're looking at it and you're like, first of all, we're trying to do the education. But what I want you to touch base on is that level of violence, like within the communities. Either it comes in within discrimination or, like the inability to want people to succeed. Mostly here in the US. I don't know if it's in Uganda, it's also there, but it's really rampant. And the things that are allowed as acceptable, it is amazing how the bar is so low for the things that are happening in terms of violence. So I wanted you to like touch base on that in terms of, violence against either Black women or men, but also in a community level.
Yeah, I will start and then I'll hand it off to Ida. Like, I will reference what Ida said. It begins with us. It begins with you. First of all, I would politely reach out to somebody and be like, I go in their inbox and be like, you may not be aware, but this has this effect on me. Now, I feel like that is the beauty of digital communication. It's like you're not in the presence of somebody and you can let them know right there and then, I I have not, I'm not appreciative of the way you've addressed this or addressed me. And because of that, I will take this step. Maybe I think we need to end this communication, or we need to end. We have the power to do that. You can do that for yourself. Because at the end of the day, you have to think about the mental health. What is it going to do to you? Because somebody else is unaware of the pain or the hurt that they're doing. If you're able to control that by yourself and being like, I will take myself out of this picture, keep your mind sane, but also reach out to that person. At one time, that person is going to come to terms with it. They're going to know that they will probably listen to a presentation like this one and check themselves like, oh my God, I didn't know I was abusing somebody else. At a certain time they do. But in the overview, though, I have seen that in the communities here. I was just looking the other day on Facebook, and somebody posted a picture of someone else and said, hey, you're stalking me. I've cut you off here, here, here on these levels of communication. But somehow you've found a way to get to me through other people, which again, we shouldn't be enabling these things. You don't know that. Somebody's asking you about somebody else. Why do you have to be the one that is giving the information? You understand what I'm saying? If somebody is staying away from a situation, why are you the one who's updating somebody else on this person's life? So again, it comes back to the voice, Jackie. We have to speak. The other day, we are having a conversation with Ida on this most recent fire burning situation for this gold medalist. And me and Ida were like, what happens to the abuser? Why don't we have that face in the media? Why are we seeing the face of who has been abused? Where is the face of the abuser? Why isn't his face up there? We need to know the names. We need to know where he is, things like that. Why are abusers protected?
Oh, by the way,
And that is the fight that we are on right now as activists. We need to know the abuser. As much as the number of times you're posting the abused is the number of times you need to be posting the abuser as well.
yeah. And I heard from
That will help.
the Bunch Foundation that the man who poured acid on the lady, apparently the jerrycan also caught on him and he died.
On him, yes, the gasoline. So we never got to know that until people stood out to say who is the
Yeah.
who's the person who was behind this, because we need to know the person. Those were voices of people that were heard.
Mm.
Most times police is protecting the person, the abuser, and that is what we are fighting on. That's what we want to change. So Ida, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, not so much, but just something. Jackie mentioned something in regards to community violence, and it's out of, it's becoming something that it needs pertinent attention and, control. Like you said, there is quite a number of organizations out there that are working in regards to, have preventive measures. And I'll give for the region in East Africa, we have the Intergovernmental Agency on Development. They have quite a lot of things in terms of community violence, in terms of counteracting and as well as preventing violent extremism. So back to us again about advocacy and activism, using digital platforms to push their agenda to call out these abusers, and also to allow the role of gender and media in proper reporting. Thank you for sharing the example of the late Rebecca, because media has not played a very big role in terms of sharing the untold stories. Even when they were reporting about the Rebecca case, for example, oh, she died. No, she was murdered. Truthfully, she was not of time to die.
Mm-hmm.
She was cut short and she was murdered. So they were the best way, because like you said, they were supposed to report like, oh, her husband or her boyfriend, because of called so and so, killed her
Yes.
because she died and she was killed. So this whole sanitization and cover-ups, these are things that we need to bring to book and also have normalized conversations about how things should be reported in terms of a big spade to be called a big spade. But also we need also to be clear that perpetrators are people in power over women.
Yes.
So because oftentimes we've seen perpetrators in real legal departments being abusers. When we have peaceful protests, for example, for the part of Uganda, you've seen all over the news how people are peacefully protesting and how the officers or the regulators are handling the protesters who are not armed and everything, holding them, sexualizing them. We've had stories whereby some of the victims have been raped in prison where they are supposed to be called into, court to defend and seek justice, but they come out to be perpetrators. And with such conversation, patriarchy at the realm where it is in favor of men. And most of the people in power of these particular regulations are men over women. So such conversations give us the ability and the potential to speak about that we actually know. You perpetrators, you're the patriarchy society enablers, so that we can come down to the part where we can counteract these kinds of violent extremism. And a very big topic of violence, community violence, is something that we can navigate beyond just domestic violence. Jackie, thank you for raising that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to again thank everybody. We're coming on to the top of the hour, and we do really want to keep time on Minority Wealth Gap. We do want to encourage you to take this message to your community, what you had, what you learned, and how it was. It's something that people need to listen to. One of the communications I had this week was with a male victim of violence. He's actually a reverend, and he has agreed to come on one of these meetings with Bernice to have a discussion on the male side. He's a reverend in Georgia. We're excited to have him. But one of the things he said is he believes that sometimes women don't know when they're being violent. And he wants to come in and break it down for us.
Yep.
An example he said is sending so many texts. And trust me, I'm guilty of it. Sometimes I do. Okay? And I'm thinking it's in good cause, But when he said that, I was like, wow. He's like, did you know that is considered violence? I'm like, this is something to think about. Everyone is learning here, right? So I'm like, okay, I need to touch base on that and figure out a way to handle my texting so people do not feel like they're being violated, right? So that is a lesson for us. But we're so excited for this upcoming session. We'll organize with him together with Catherine and Bernice. Really have the men speak. We're really looking for that male voice. Let us come as women and learn what can make us better spouses, or what can be seen as violence in relationships, because we're all here to learn. Kate, I'll turn it over to you at this point.
Yeah, thank you. So lastly in the call, we're about 3 minutes to the end of the hour. I just wanted to post some of the contacts here. Take a quick screenshot, some numbers that you have to have close to you, because you can never know. Whatever kind of abuse, home, work, you have to have a number that you can call. Call that number, text that 88788 to reach for help on national domestic violence. That is for the people who are in the US. And I have to say that so loud because I've seen that in the communities here. People from back home have maintained the same way of life at home. They are afraid to reach out for help. Women are in the US and still being abused, yet they have all these resources available to us. So, as a person in the US, you're doing injustice to somebody in Uganda who does not have these resources when you don't use them. because this is what you need to be doing. What of the people in the Uganda who cry out for help and there's nobody to help? So if you have that resource available to you, use it. Reach out to us also, admin@minoritywealthgap.org. Send us your story. Ask us how you want. Ask us for help. How do you need help? We are available to connect you to the resources that you need and that you must have. Not just help, but if you want to learn about maybe economic empowerment, we have the resources for that. We can connect you to people who are of no charge. They're going to be able to help you without you paying. Accounts, credit scores, just learning generally about your economic empowerment. And then, of course, housing as well. We have those contacts. Don't be stuck in a relationship because you don't know where you're going to put your head. That is available for you on this side. And for the people in Uganda, because you don't know it doesn't mean that it is not there. It is. You just have to reach out for help. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you for those of you who attended. I really appreciate. Inbox me, inbox Jacqueline, reach out to Ida. Ida, can you put your contact in the chat here?
Right.
Jackie, your email, and I'll put mine as well. Thank you, everyone.